Hello, BookTube. I'm here with another top 10, and this time it's short story writers. This was actually rather difficult because there are so many great short story writers that there's been out there. I've whittled it down to 10 with honorable mentions, but there's many, many more than that. And the four honorable mentions will be explained why they're there when I get to it. Uh, but if you like short stories, any of these writers are great. So let's get into it. There's no order to these, and they're sort of not. I'm not ranking them in any way of top literary merit. They're ones. They all have literary merit, I believe. But they're sort of favorites to myself as well. And as I say, there's no order here. It's just the order that came to my mind. Catherine Mansfield, who lived from 1888 to 1923. She was born and raised in New Zealand, and I guess she wrote a lot of short stories. I've read most of them. Like there's just only like a handful, like five or six that I haven't read. And I've got a Wordsworth edition of her complete short stories. I bought that in the year of the plague, and I was reading through or rereading through those, and I actually hit one or two I think that I hadn't read. So I'm pretty well covered most of her short stories over the years. Uh, and her stuff is not sir. It can be uplifting in a different way, but it's very realistic, and she doesn't pull any punches with her writing. She moved from New Zealand to the UK, and she was on the outskirts of the Bloomsbury group. She was never sort of adopted in with them. I don't know the full reason why, but her short stories are very, very good. And the reason why that comes to mind, as it came as the first one, Mark at Book Time with Elvis does a really good short story reading every Saturday, and in the last couple of weeks was a Catherine Mansfield, so that's why she was in my mind. And hence the first one. I'll put a link to his channel and to the playlist for his Saturday short story. And I guess the collection for Catherine Mansfield is best known as the Garden Party, including the title story. And that's still in print, I believe, as a Black Penguin and probably Oxford World Classics as well. Then we move on to sort of the other side of the world, in a sense, United States with Erskine Caldwell, 1903 to 1987. He was from Georgia, and he writes with a Southern flair, and I really like his short stories. I like his some of his novels too, like God's Little Acre, and Tobacco Road. It's a lot of them are set sort of in the 30s, sharecroppers, and the one I particularly like it in the short stories more so is Georgia Boy, a little collection, and it's just about a boy, living in sort of Depression era Georgia, more or less, and uh, I had that slim volume with me in the Middle East, so I read it several times while I was in the Middle East. It was one of three books that I had with me. Then we've got a French writer, 19th century Guy de Maupassant, 1850 to 1893. He wrote a lot. I would say hundreds and hundreds. I've read a lot of his short stories, and I thoroughly enjoy them and continually go back. He wrote sort of socialist type stuff, like, well, not socialist, that's the wrong word, social orientated, because he talks about society and events. There's naturalism, he wrote, and realism, and he was taken under the wing of Flaubert, And he met Zola and other writers of the time, and he's fondly remembered, I think, and rightly so, as a master of short fiction. Then we've got Sherwood Anderson, another American writer, 1876 to 1941. I find his stuff, like, he's very American, and it's very, like, you can almost smell like the when he's talking, like, it's just not talking, but when he's writing, it's very, very evocative of the senses. I think, and his biggest sort of collection is Winesburg, Ohio. But yeah, he's another very good writer. And then we got Edgar Allan Poe, which really doesn't need a whole lot of introduction. He lived from 1809 to 1949, a short life. He wrote a lot of short stories, sort of macabre type short stories, Telltale Heart, Fall of the House of Usher. There's I continue to read his and reread his stories, and there's several that I haven't read, and I'm keeping those as being fresh. So I haven't read everything of his, which you could easily do because he wasn't hugely prolific in that way. But yeah, and one that I read over and over every year, sometimes twice a year, is Some Words with a Mummy. And it is just a fabulous story. And he not only just wrote, he wrote a novel, Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, but he also wrote poetry, really great poet, and oodles and oodles, and that's a technical term, oodles of essays and literary criticism. And there is a Library of America. I don't know if it's out of print. I don't know if any of theirs go out of print, but it's honking. It's like 1,400 pages of his essays, and it's fabulous. Then we go back to the old world here with Anton Chekhov, 1860 to 1904. Another writer that was extremely prolific. I believe hundreds and hundreds of short stories. I've read a lot, but I don't even know if everything has been translated from Russian. And recently, in the Year of the Plague, again, I believe, or was it maybe 2019, there was a new hardcover that came out, and I think it's a new translation by Pevier and Velikovsky. 52 short stories, and really, really great short stories in there. Then we got O. Henry, who was a pen name of William Sidney Porter, who lived from 1862 to 1910. He was an extremely prolific author. Again, hundreds and hundreds of short stories. He did a lot of things. He was a bank clerk for a while where he got in trouble. He embezzled, or probably embezzled, and spent some time in prison, and then was released and died in New York in 1910 of cirrhosis of the liver, diabetes, and heart problems. And I've got two big collections here. This is, let's look at the first volume, actually, first. It's The Best of O. Henry, 100 Stories Chosen by Sapper. Sapper is another writer. He is, that was his pen name. And it's H.H. McNeil. I think it's H.H. McNeil. He was sort of the creator of Bulldog Drummond, which are fabulous stories, novels. But this here is 100 of his stories, and this was a presentation volume to the Davenport Foundation School, and it's presented May 19th, 1938, by Alderman Charles Robertson, Chairman LCC Education Committee, to C. Rose, a Form V matriculation prize, and it says at the school examination in July 1937, and it's signed J.R. Evans, headmaster. And it's interesting, like this gold stamp here, you can feel it right through the cover. because it's not published this way. This was done for this. And these would have had dust jackets on, but they're nice. There's a little, darkening of the spine, but they're just really nice books. I've got several of these of different authors. And then you got 100 more O. Henry, 100 more of the master stories introduced by James Hilton. And these are they're over 1,000 pages each. And James Hilton is best known for Goodbye, Mr. Chips, and Lost Horizon. Really good writer. So that's O. Henry. Then we got W. Somerset Maugham, an English writer, 1874 to 1965. I think he's a fabulous writer. His novels are really, really good. I haven't read every novel of his. There's a few that I have not read, and he was also known as a travel writer as well. But his short stories really stand out for me. There's been collections over the years, complete collections and near complete collections. And a lot of his stories have been turned, and novels have been turned into films. One of his really good short stories called Rain, it's about a possibly ill repute woman going into the South Seas and being running up against a bigoted preacher, and it was made into a fabulous silent film called Sadie Thompson with Gloria Swanson in 1928. Sadly, the final reel of that has disappeared, so it's been reconstructed. Kino Video had a DVD out of it. I'm really hoping that they will get it on a Blu-ray, but that's besides the point. But anyway, it was redone again as Rain in the early 30s with Joan Crawford, and they tried to squash the original one and destroy it all, which they almost came close to. But yeah, and other stories like Quartet is a great sort of some stories. You've got stories of shopkeepers, just sort of everyday Joes in many ways, whether they work for the church or anywhere. There's a whole width and breadth of his writing, but he's very, very good in any form, but his short stories, he's clearly, I would call him a master of short story. Then we got Rudyard Kipling, 1865 to 1936. In the 21st century, a contentious writer because of British imperialism, but it doesn't change the fact that he's a fabulous writer, adventure writer. The stories The Man Who'd Be King is a fabulous story and made into a fabulous film. Jungle Book stories, Just So stories. There's a whole string of it. And he wrote novels as well. Kim is one of my favorites of his, and poetry as well. All sorts of material. And then we got Saki, another pseudonym for Hector Hugh Munro, lived from 1870 to 1960. And not a hugely prolific writer. I think everything of his pretty well. His short stories could fit in a nice big... I've got a hardcover of his complete short stories. And they're humorous in many ways. And some of them are very short. It only takes you a couple minutes to read. And they're very pleasant. They're sort of like P.G. Wodehouse in some ways, like he's compared to, for the humor. But I think with a bit more literary flair, I would say, than P.G. Wodehouse. But they're both good. And then that was the 10th one. I think we went through all those. Yeah. Sure, yeah, and I'll check off Henry. Yeah. And then I've got some honorable mentions. Flannery O'Connor. I'll just explain what these honorable mentions are. They're authors that I've read only a small sampling, extremely small sampling of their short stories, and really think highly of them from that very small sample. and Flannery O'Connor is one, 1925 to 1964, and she pops up because recently on BookTube BookTube has sparked or re-sparked my interest in her, which I do want to get her complete short stories at some point. But yeah, she's Southern Gothic. Writes a lot of stuff religious, sort of, and relationship stuff. But there's a bit of a darkness to a lot of it. As I say, it's Southern Gothic, and I want to explore more. But as I say, just even sampling a few stories, that you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing. Kate Chopin, 1851 to 1904, another writer like that, American writer. And yeah, it's just, the stuff that I've read is very good. She's very outspoken, socially aware of the time, and speaks out in the stories that I've read. So I'm assuming other ones are similar. We've got Henry James, 1843 to 1916. A fabulous writer all round, I think, and I really like his short stories, and even shorter sort of novels. Turn of the Screw is a fabulous story. We'll just call it a long short story. Will that work? There are, I think the Library of America has done 3 or 4 volumes of his complete short stories. And I've got volume 1 of the Everyman Library edition, and I was dipping into it. I think it was early this year or late last year. I can't remember now. It was a gift, and I really enjoyed it. But again, but this is the great thing of short stories. You can dip into this stuff and leave it for a long time, and then come back to it. That's the joy of short stories. Well, I didn't say he lived from 1843 to 1916, if I didn't say. And another fourth and last sort of honorable mention is Dorothy Parker, 1893 to 1967. A sort of journalist sort of type, writing nonfiction, and there's a lot of wit to her. And I haven't read too much of her short stories. The wit isn't quite there. The humor isn't quite there in the short stories. They're more poignant, I think, I would say. And she was part of the Algonquin Round Table. I think it was named after the Algonquin Hotel in New York. And just as an aside, Louise Brooks stayed there in the early 20s, and she was kicked out for being immoral. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, she's another one. But as I say, there's so many other short stories to go by. Like I say, I didn't mention Mark Twain, which his short stories I think are great. Gwyn Thomas is another one. Literally the list goes on, and as I'm doing this, I start thinking of other writers as well. And there's writers that I haven't tried that I'm sure are probably worth adding to this. But yeah, so have you read any of these writers? Are they some of your favorites, or are there other writers that I didn't even mention? Are they your favorites? Do sound out in the comments. I want to know, and let's talk about this, because short stories are really great. And as I say, if you haven't checked out Mark at Book Time at Elvis, his Saturday, his reading of a short story, then do check it out. I'll put a link in the description. I'll see you next time, BookTube.